instructor for this course is Professor Marc Fewel, who is affiliated with CNRS and University of Grenoble in France. I'm very thankful to him for accepting this invitation and coming all the way for this extended stay, and a course which I think is going to be a fascinating course on dislocations, both theory and simulations. And at least I am not aware of such a comprehensive course on dislocations being available anywhere. Maybe he teaches one in Grenoble, but I've never had an in-depth course on dislocations ever. So I myself am excited about going through this course. Professor Fewel's primary research interests are in the area of dislocations and simulations of dislocations. He tells me that recently he's also got interested in studying cavitation and erosion for marine applications. So things like turbine blades which go into the water and are exposed to flowing water and get eroded and so on. The reason I am also very briefly talking about the research interests of faculty members here is that you are here for about 10 or 11 days. We have built in sufficient breaks into the day that we hope will give enough time for informal interactions. So please do feel free to come up to, of course, your peers from various institutes across the country, but also all faculty members who are present here. Do come chat with us. That's one of the purposes of the Gyan course. The other distinguished speaker that we have is Professor Sundar Raman, who is here from IIT Madras. Well, before he went to IIT Madras, he was a proud Mumbaiker. He was at BRC for over 30 years, 36 years. And then I guess he wanted to experience teaching, academia, with all its fun and glory. So he moved to IIT Madras. He's an expert in electron microscopy of defects, and he's going to talk to you about imaging dislocations, imaging boundaries, and so on. In addition to those things, his research interests also lie in the area of phase transformations in materials, phase transformations brought about by temperature changes, brought about by radiation, and stress-induced phase transformations. Okay. And of course, microscopy, a little bit of which he will talk to us about. And he's from the Department of Metallurgical and Materials Engineering in IIT Madras. And sitting next to him is Professor Shankaran, also from the Department of Metallurgical and Materials Engineering. He's our embedded faculty member, or embedded student as I should call him. He is interested, both academic and research interest is in the area of dislocations. And he very strongly believes that people who do experiments and people who do modeling should have close conversations so that we can address fairly complex problems from many ways. So neither should work in isolation from each other. And his research interest also is in microstructure and mechanical behavior correlation, and of course electron microscopy. One more person who you may see every now and then is Professor Guru Rajan. So Guru and I work very closely, and his expertise is in phase field modeling. But he has several other expertise, molecular dynamics simulations, Monte Carlo simulations, and so on. And along with Professor Shankaran, we are actually trying to now implement this dialogue between experimentalists and modeling people and see what complicated problems can be addressed by this. Okay? And I am Preeta Pant. I am the person who's been sending you various emails and sometimes getting your hostel numbers wrong. Hopefully that did not cause too much problems for any of you. I am in the Department of Metallurgical Engineering and Material Science. My research interest is in the area of dislocations, how they influence deformation behavior, and with more learned colleagues, I'm sort of foraying into things such as phase transformation, dislocation, boundary interactions, and so on. So very warm welcome to you all. I know that we have people from as far as Ropar, and I know you are from Ropar? Okay, so they are, I guess, your academic grandchildren, I assume.
Maybe my grandchild, yes. You are working with Samir?
I know that there are several of you from IIT Madras, IIT Hyderabad, I think, right? And others, Kharagpur, I remember. Okay, so please do interact with each other. It's a community of peers. You will find this interaction to be very helpful as you go along. You can stay in touch with each other, continue the conversations later, and hope we all have a very good time. If you experience any problems related to your stay here or otherwise, please do get in touch with any of us. There are students from IIT Bombay, there are faculty members from IIT Bombay, there is the CEP office staff. We do our best to fix whatever it is that problem that arises. Okay? So with that, over to you, Mark.
Okay. So thank you very much, all of you, for coming here and listening to my different lectures. Actually, we're here for 10 days. So I hope you will not be totally bothered by my talks every day and so on. So I hope we will do it slowly. I think I will do it slowly so that everybody will get the information. So we'll start from the beginning, from scratch, and gradually we will go up to the latest developments in dislocation dynamics. So that's the goal. So this is here typically two examples of the DD simulations you will see during the lectures. So my name is Marc Fivel. So in France we say Fivel, not Fivel, but it looks the same. Marc Fivel. I'm coming from Grenoble University in France. So you may want to know where is Grenoble, because some of you are already said that they don't know much about that place. So this is where it is located. So from here, this is Grenoble. So it's on the southeast of France. So this is the French country. And if you zoom a bit on it, so this is Grenoble, and Paris is on the top there. This is Grenoble city. So this is the mountains. This is the Alps, the French Alps, where you have the highest mountains in Europe for 4,800 meters. So this is the Grenoble city. You can see that it is just beneath three mountains. You have big mountains there, and this is the valley. The valley is very low valley, very flat, and this is the Grenoble campus is there. And my house is on top of this mountain. You're not on top of the mountains, but in the mountain. And if you zoom a bit on it, just to see, this is how it looks like. This is my house there, and Grenoble is in the valley there. So this is how it looked a few days ago actually. And last weekend, when I was walking a bit in that mountain, it was like that. You see, a amount of snow. So it snowed a lot. So this is not the same weather as here, as you can see. It's a lot colder. It's typically 5 degrees in the morning in the city, maybe -2 at my home. So it's not as warm as it could be here. So I'm very happy to be in this hot country. Okay, so this was just a short introduction. So the objective of my lectures is the following. So this is my goal, my ultimate goal for these 2 weeks. I want you to understand the concept of dislocations. I want you all to be sure what is a dislocation, how you can analyze a dislocation, and you will have some very nice experiments to help you for that. And then we'll see how this is related to the mechanical behavior of the dislocation. So when they move, what does this imply to the mechanical behavior? And of course, and I think you are all here for that, we will see how to model it, to do some modeling of dislocation in a computer. So here I will show you two different dislocation dynamics code. The first one will be 3DIS. So that was, you saw that on the first pictures here. Here is 3DIS. This is the one that I use the most. It's the older code, oldest code we use in Grenoble. And the new one, which is Mnemodis, and I will give it to you. So you will go back home with this code in your hand. So you will have this code, and you will know how to use it. It's a nodal code, which is quite powerful. Okay, so that's for the computing. And then, of course, I hope you will be able to run your own simulations to change the code and to do things you want. It's an open source code, so you can do what you want with it. Okay, it's typically similar to Paradis. Okay, so the lectures we define together with Prita Prant here will be something like that. So I will give you something like 19 lectures of 1 hour. So they do not correspond. One lecture is not one topic here. It may cover several topics or less than one topic. But the ideas are there. So 19 lectures here. Today we will focus on the introduction part. which I guess for many of you will be a kind of recalling of things that you already know, but I want you to use the same notations as the one I'm using and to be sure that everything is clear. So today we will cover the full 9 first items, okay? And tomorrow morning we will have some tutorials, analytical calculation of dislocation interactions together in the morning. And later on we'll go further, and again you will have some lectures and tutorials. And at the end, typically next week, we will do a lot of tutorials with NuModis. As soon as I will have introduced you the code, we will play 1 week, not 1 week, but let's say all the maybe 5 days next week on NuModis, okay? For that also, we have some nice TM lectures that will be given by Professor Sundararaman. Typically, he will have a first lecture this afternoon where he will give some illustration of what I will say before this morning and this afternoon. So now let's go in the lectures. So if you want deeper information, this is the books I would recommend a lot. So typically, if you don't know anything regarding dislocation, I would recommend you to first start with this book from Hull and Bacon, this one here, which is a nicely written book. This was the second edition of the book. Those are the most 2 famous books on dislocations. The first one is from the French guy Jacques Friedel, who unfortunately deceased 2 years ago. He's now passed his way 2 years ago. But it's a very nice book about the mechanism of dislocations. If you want to understand what happens to the dislocation with the feeling of how it happens, this book I think is the best. Now, if you want to have equations, and if you do not want to spend time writing equations and you are not sure if it's correct or not, then I would advise this book. This book, everything has been done for you already. So you don't need to compute anything anymore. Everything has been done in that book. And I think now there is a 3rd edition. This was the second one. There is a 3rd edition which just came out with a new co-author. I don't remember who, but there is a new book that you can... Okay, so you know this one. So maybe you have the book here?
Yes, the book.
You have the book, okay. So you can buy that book. Now, more recently, about numerical modeling, there are two books which are interesting for you. The first one was written by Vasily Bulatov and Wei Kai from Stanford. Wei Kai is in Stanford now. At that time, he was at Livermore in California. And this is the book which contains everything about dislocation modeling, from the atomic to the dislocation dynamics. And dislocation dynamics here is Paradis. This is where they explain how Paradis is working, okay? The Paradis code, I will go on that. It's a nodal code, or dislocation dynamics code, that was developed a few years ago. And the most recent book is that one from Ladislas Kubin in France. Kubin, maybe you say Kubin, Ladislas Kubin in France. So this one is about dislocation and modeling of dislocation with different applications on the plasticity, typically dislocation evolution, laws, and whatever. So this is the 5 books I would advise. Of course, you have plenty of them. You may find other books, and maybe Professor Sundararaman will also advise some other books. But these are the one I would suggest. So that's one more advice I would like you to write somewhere. This is a website, numodis.com, that I try to update regularly. So typically, this is where we are. The course at Mumbai is here. This is our lectures. And on that website, you will get some information regarding the code treatise that we use the most, a bit on NuModis. This is not finished yet because ultimately you will get here a way to download the code typically, but it's not done yet. And this is also very interesting for you. This is Institute TM movies. So typically I will show you some of them today. So you will see how the dislocation, real dislocation, not numerical dislocation, but real one moves in the materials. And Optidis is just an optimization of that code, so it's something that makes the code a lot faster. So we are just now optimizing NuModis, the one you will get, and this one is a ultra-parallel code of version of this code here. Okay, so you can go freely on that website many times if you want, and if you want typically to give lectures on dislocation dynamics, at that place you will find a lot of movie animations and so on that may help you for your teaching or your understanding of dislocations. Okay, so let's go to the introduction to dislocations. So if I want to start from scratch, I would say, assuming that you know nothing regarding dislocations, I would say, okay, let's look at structural materials. This is what you are interested in, I guess. And this is also geomaterials, typically ice. If you look at ice, this is Groenland, you see that this ice is like a solid. It's like a fluid or solid, but this is crystalline. If you look deep in ice, you would see also crystals from grains like that, different shape of the grains, different orientation of the grains, similarly to what you can see in metals like iron or copper or whatever. So you have the same kind of structure, although it's not a structural materials, you have also grains in this geomaterial. And locally, if you zoom in a grain, you can see the atomic arrangement. And this is typically hexagonal structure. You can see that they rely on an hexagon pattern like that. And this is typically an FCC material here for this stainless steel. So those materials are typically what we can address in this lecture. And if we go in the deformation of these materials, if we look how these materials deform when you apply a load on top of it, we can distinguish two stages. The first stage is the elasticity. You all know about that. If at that point I will release the load, it will go back exactly the same position. So it means that this is totally reversible range, reversible stage. And this is the plasticity, irreversible stage. It means that if I unload at that stage here, I will get a permanent deformation here, which is this plastic strain. So my question is, what is happening during that deformation range? What happens during that loading here? So if you look in the material, so this is a typically stainless steel specimen that we will pull on. So here I will apply a force, F. I will measure an elongation, E, which is the variation of the length versus the initial length of that small area here. This area has been polished so that we can look in SEM and EBSD, so we can look at the crystallographic orientation of all the grain at that zone here during the loading stage. And we will see at different stage of the loading what happens to this zone of the material, this area. So what did I plot here is the true stress versus the true strain curve. So what is it? It means that the true strain is just epsilon, which is the integration over the length of the deformation, dl over L. So this gives a logarithmic term, which is logarithmic of 1 plus E, E being this elongation here. Okay? You can do the same for the true stress. The true stress is the force divided by the stress, or the force you apply here, divided by the section, not the stress, the section. Okay? And the section is the real section at the given point, so it's not the initial section. So the section at the point can be computed assuming that there is a conservation of the volume during that stage. So if you assume that the volume is the section times the length and is also what was at the beginning, section initial times the initial length, it means that the section is like that. The reverse of the section is like the reverse of the initial one times 1 plus E. E again is this elongation term. So with this correction, you can compute the real true strain, sigma, which is F over S, which is just the initial stress. So let's say this is the engineering stress, they call it, times 1 plus E. So this is what I plotted here versus what I plotted there. Okay? So I think you all know that. I told you I will start basically. Okay? This is the basics. So first we have this elastic stage, and then we have the plastic stage, which is usually represented by a power law. This is the Ludwig equations, typically, where we have a K factor here, and the power N, which is smaller than 1, of course, something like 0.2, 0.3. And then let's have a look of what it is doing at that place where we look at SEM. So initially, this is how it looks like. So this area here is containing many grains. You can see all the grain orientation here and all these grain boundaries, some small, some bigger grains. And this is the size of the SEM image. And this was taken at the initial stage here before deformation. Okay? Now I pull, so this is the elastic limit. So here, theoretically, macroscopically, I am still in the elastic domain, but locally, you already see some slip lines. I don't know if you see clearly, but there are some slip lines here. Not everywhere, of course, but in a few grains, some grain deformed already. Although mechanically we think that this is elastic, locally it could be already plastic. So this is something that is usual with metals. You may have plasticity before the elastic macroscopic limit. If you go further, so this is here, you can see more and more slip lines, and new grains are also invaded by slip lines, and more, and more. So here I'm there now. Here you can see clearly the slip lines, and because of the out-of-plane deformation of the grains, you can see some 3D imaging of the structure. You can see the grains coming out from the surface. And finally, this is the ultimate picture I will give here at that place where you can see that all the grains deformed in slip planes. So like that, you have some specific orientations where the plasticity occurred. Okay? And this happens in many, many materials, not only in that stainless steel, of course. Typically, this is what happens in uranium. You can see slip lines. This is in aluminum here also, some slip lines. And you can see a grain boundary here where the slip lines intersect with the grain boundary. So it means that in conclusion, for crystalline materials, including ice, for example, plasticity is just developed by shear on slip systems. So this will be called a slip system, like that. And the physical origin of this slip in that specific planes is the dislocation. Okay? So let's go deeper for that. What is a dislocation? So typically, if we use what we call the Frankel model, this is the atomic structure like that. And if you want to deform plastically your network, you need to apply a shear stress like this that will deform elastically. And then you need to break the link here to reconnect that to that guys and that to that guys to make a permanent deformation. So if you look and if you zoom at the atomic structure, you can assume that this is one atomic plane and the other one, the next atomic plane below here. And if you apply your shear stress like this, you will apply something which is sinusoidal. I mean that if I go back here the stress is 0. Now I move a bit the atoms, it will increase the stress, and when it will reach the top position, the stress will be equal to 0, and then you have a negative stress to fall in the hole and so on. So you have a sinusoidal evolution of the critical stress to move your atoms between one atomic plane to the next one. So it will look like that. The stress will be like a critical stress versus a sign, and the sign depends only on this distance here, which is B, so the interatomic distance between the two positions of the atoms. Now, if you want to estimate this critical stress here, you can assume that this, typically at the initial stage here, when you have very small deformation, you can assume that this is linear relationship. So the stress is proportional to 2 pi x over b, like this. So that with elasticity, you can compute this stress the same way. The stress in the elastic mode will be mu. So mu is the shear modulus, mu is the g. So I don't know if you call it G or mu here, depending if you are mechanical guys or metallurgical guys, typically. So this is the shear modulus. So the shear modulus times the shear strain, like this, which is mu x over A. So this is the definition of the deformation here. And if you say that those two are equal, it means that your critical stress here, tau c, is mu b over 2 pi A. So this is the value that you should put in front of this relationship. So the critical stress is mu b over 2 pi A. And this means that finally, when you apply this displacement here, you will get the maximum value here when this sign is equal to 1, so when x is equal to b over A. And at that position, it gives a stress which is quite high. The stress for aluminum, typically, if you put the shear modulus of aluminum here, 32 gigapascal, you find that the critical stress here is about 3.2 gigapascal. And I would love to have some aluminum with such a high value of yield stress, but this is unfortunately impossible. In reality, aluminum has very low value for the yield stress. And typically, pure aluminum could be as low as 0.3 megapascal. So few order of magnitude difference between this theory and this reality. Okay? So it means that the mechanism is not that one. It's not like this that plasticity occurs. It's not just shifting the atomic planes. There is something else which happens, and this alternative mechanism will be dislocations. So these dislocations were something that people already predicted a long time ago in 1934, typically. Taylor, Polanyi, and Horowitz, they were not working together. They were working in several groups, but at the same time, they published something on the same topic, on dislocations. And this is how it looks like. So first you have a defect. So assuming that you get a defect somewhere, so typically this defect here, it's very easy to propagate the defect toward the surface like that. Much more easy than shifting all the atoms at the same time. So if you have the defect, of course you assume that you get this defect, but you always have a defect in your material. So if you have your defect somewhere, then it will be easy to propagate your defect from one position to the next, and then to the surface. And at the surface, when the defect reaches the surface, you have the plastic permanent deformation, which is printed on the surface. That will be what we call the Burger's vector. Okay? So this mechanism is exactly the same as a caterpillar, we say, or if you assume that you have a carpet, that you will try to pull on this carpet also, so it's very hard to pull it. But if you make a small bump like that, and then you push on the bump, it's very easy to propagate the Burger's vector on the carpet. So this is the same thing. So you just need to nucleate the dislocations, That costs some energy, but then it's very easy to move it, okay? And dislocations are always pre-existing in the material. You will see a lot of them with the TM pictures from Professor Sundara Raman. The dislocations are full. Your material is always full of dislocations. Just imagine that you have some balls that you want to pack in a box. You have a big box and you have some ping pong balls and you want to pack them. If you do that very seriously, it will be impossible to have something regular. At one point, you will get a defect, and this defect typically will be something like a dislocation, just because it's very impossible to have something perfect everywhere. Okay? So what is a dislocation? So now we go a little bit deeper in the topic. So this is typically the atomic structure like this, and here is an atomic plane which is missing. There is no more, this plane here is no more there. So it means that here there is an extra half plane which is there and no more plane in front of it. So we represent this thing by this cross here. This extra half plane is that position here, and this horizontal line represents the glide plane where the dislocation will move, okay? So when you shear your crystal on that, it will propagate this defect as we saw on the previous picture. And when the defect will reach the surface, it will print the step here. And you see that because of this motion, you have finally something which has been just translated. It's a translation of the upper part of the material compared to the bottom part of the material, okay? Here the line is perpendicular to the displacement. The line is this line here, the red line here. And the plastic step is this step here that you can see on the right at the end here. So the line and the step are perpendicular one to the other one. So this is called an edge dislocation. Why edge? It's just because you introduce some edge here in your atoms. You have put your extra half plane in your atom, so this looks like an edge, okay? Of course, this is not the only way to do it. You can do the same deformation process, so you can lead to the same final structure here with a screw dislocation. So what is a screw dislocation? It looks like that. You can see that your specimen has been screwed like this, so it means that you take a part of it and you screw it so that it will go back on that direction. This direction is again the Burgers vector, so the displacement vectors you apply. So the line now is somewhere here. It's no more there, it's here. So this is the line, the red line here. And when you apply your shear, the line moves perpendicularly to the applied shear. So it moves that way, here. And at the end, it creates exactly the same step on the final edge of the cube, like this. So you have another mechanism, another dislocation can create exactly the same deformation macroscopically in this cube, okay? But now this line is collinear to the step. It's collinear to this Burgers vector is here. This is the line which is collinear to the Burgers vector. So those are mainly the two, I would say, rough view of dislocation, edge or screw. And if you do that in the computer, that's typically what you can do next week. This is how it looks like. When the edge is moving inside this cube, you can see that there is a shear of the upper part compared to the bottom part, which is translated. And when it reaches the surface here, you have the Burgers vector, which is printed. In the case of the screw, you have this thing here. You have this rotating of the surface here, the screwing of the surface, leading to the same final shape for the material, okay? So two different mechanisms, but exactly the same final shape for the crystal. Now, in reality, dislocations are not exactly screw, not exactly edges. They are just curves, like this. So this is the case of a curve. So you have your dislocation, which is curved, like this. When it enters the crystal, a small part is more like a screw, another part is more like an edge, and at the end, you have the same final structure, same final shape of your material, like that, with a step on the right and a small step on the left, okay? So two things to retain. Dislocations are not edge or screw, they just are mixed segments, which are curved segments, and they propagate a given slip direction, which is this direction here. They propagate this Burgers vector here, okay? Whatever they are, if they are edge or screw, they all propagate the same slip direction. So here is another movie showing what I explained. So this is typically a computer simulation of a dislocation expanding, so a dislocation expanded in the cube, which is called the Frank-Reed source. This Frank-Reed source is active, so because of the shear, and you can see at the surface the deformation shape of the cube. Here the colors indicate the stresses due to the dislocation, because when you have a dislocation, we will see it later, it will induce some stresses in the material, and the colors here are exactly the stresses due to the dislocation. So you can see that they are here. This one dislocation, one Burgers vector is printed here. A new dislocation is coming, so you have another loop coming. It will shear again the material, and now you have two Burgers vectors at the same place. Okay? So I already spoke a lot of Burgers vectors, but we need to define what is a Burgers vector, so we will see how we define that. This is just my conclusion of what I say. I want this to be clear for you. I mean that a mixed dislocation, like that, this is the mixed dislocation, is the general view of a dislocation. It's not an edge or a screw, it's a mixed, like this, which is shearing the crystal. The upper part compared to the bottom has been sheared, and it has been sheared along a slip direction, a slip vector, like this, which is uniquely defined in terms of amplitude. It's one atomic distance, the B, that we will call B, and it is constant across the sheared surface and all along the line. So I mean that every part of the line here is shifting the material, the upper part from the bottom, from one Burgers vector. So it's a constant quantity, these slip vectors, along the line, okay? But this doesn't say anything regarding the direction of the dislocation line, so there is nothing is said regarding the orientation of your line, if it's going from the left to the right or from the right to the left. This has nothing to do with this, okay? And this orientation here varies. It varies from a screw part here to an edge part here, so the orientation of the line is varying, but not the slip directions. And the direction of propagation of the shear, so how the dislocation is moving, is just due to something that we will see in a few minutes, which is due to the Pitch-Keller equations. It's a force, the force that you apply on your dislocation that makes it move on the direction you want. Okay, so that's the first small conclusion. So now dislocations are not just a concept, they are a reality. So this is a typical in situ TM experiments. I will show some of the movies like this. So this is coming from the website I told you. So in numodis.com you can get this kind of movie. And I think in the PDF file I will give you, you will have a link to this movie, so you will be able to visualize all these animations, okay? So you can see that this is quite a rare picture, actually. Why is it rare? It's just because, luckily, François Louchet from Grenoble was able to find, in these materials, the only case where the dislocation was pinned in the 2 points, and the 2 points were inside the thin foil. You know that TM is just looking through a thin foil, so the thickness is very small, something like 200 nanometers. So usually, if you have a dislocation in that foil, it could be pinned at a point, but then the dislocation touches the surface. And this is what we call a spiral source. So it's rotating around the point. Here, look, by chance, the 2 points were pinned inside the thin foil. So this is very rare. Actually, that's the only movie we have of a Frank Reed source. I will show the movie again. So it looks like the picture on the right. It means that you have, this is the 2 points here, tuck. The dislocation is active like that, so you have the pin here and there. This is the top and bottom surface. You can see that dislocation touched the surface here, like this, and it makes a kind of line. So this corresponds to this line and that line here. I don't know what is up, what is down. This is something that maybe Professor Sodaram can tell me, but here I don't know if it's up or down, but I know that those are the two surfaces touched by the Frank Reed source. So you can see that dislocation exists. Now they are not just a concept, they do exist, and they move, actually. And this is similar to what we can do in the computer. In the computer, when you have this, then every time the dislocation reaches the surface, we don't see it here because it's, the zoom is not big enough. You should do high resolution to visualize at the surface some steps like this. But believe me, here at the surface and there, you have steps. You do have steps at the surface. But the magnitude is very small. It's something like a few angstroms, so typically less than 3 angstroms. So we don't see it here on the TM. Okay? So now, what is this Burgers vector? I spoke many times of a Burgers vector, but what is it? So if we take typically a deformed structure, deformed material with an edge, you can see the edge. This is the extra half plane, stopped here. So this is typically the edge here. This is the steps you should do to locate and to identify the Burgers vector of this dislocation. First, you should select arbitrary. So this is your choice. You decide what is the sense of the unit vectors u on your dislocation line. So typically, I will assume here that the vector is like that, so coming out of the table. So this is my line direction. I put an orientation to the line coming out from the table. Okay. Then I do the same in the perfect crystal. So this is the deformed crystal, and this is the same without any defect, assuming that it's a perfect FCC crystal, typically, or let's say cubic material. Now, using this convention, I will draw a closed circuit surrounding these dislocations in the defect region, like that. I will start at a given point, like this, which is S, like my starting point. And then I rotate surrounding my dislocation in the direct mode. So I mean that as soon as I define that this is coming out, here I should move on the right hand orientation. You see, it's a right hand screw. I don't know how you call it in English, but this is the. In French, we like to say that this is a cork. You see, like because we love the wine, you know, in French. So we say this is the cork orientation. Okay, right hand screw. Okay, so this is the right hand rules. So we rotate in the right hand. You can make a closed circuit. The closed circuits could have some defects. Because you can avoid particles like that and come back. It has to be closed. You don't need to have the squared things. It has just to be closed. And you do the same every time in the real space like this. Up, up, up. And then here you see that I stopped because my 2 points merged at the same place. But here they do not merge at the same place in the real space. So the difference between the two will be called the FS, like final start. This will be my Burgers vectors with this convention. So my convention is the FSRH. So finish, start, because I say that the Burgers vectors is from the finish to the start using the right-hand convention. Okay? So FSHR rules is the one I will use. So I don't want to stop here. I want to have one more remark, which is very important because it will be used for dislocation dynamics. Using that convention, you have the U, the B, and the normal to the plane, so the third direction, which gives the N vector here. And this N vector is the one where you have the extra half plane. Okay, so with this convention, you have the unicity of the normal direction. So you know that U, B, N, you know where is the extra half plane. This is very important when you will deal with prismatic loops, typically. And later on, we'll do many exercises with prismatic loops. And if you want to know if it's a vacancy or interstitial loops, then this is very important, this rule here. So you have to make sure that in your code, U, B, N is direct when you have your dislocation dynamics code. Otherwise, you have some undefined zone in your material. So U, the line, B, the burgers, N is pointing toward the extra half plane. Okay? So that's something very important for dislocation modeling. Is it clear? By the way, I didn't say anything, but you may ask questions, and you are recommended to ask questions, actually. And after the lecture, also, there is 15 minutes for questions, right, Prita? So you will have also some free time to discuss. Also, you should stop me after 1 hour, because my lecture could be long. And I think I have 3 lectures today, but I can stop whenever you want, actually. They can be all merged. Okay? So I'm not late. Okay for that? No question? I think many of you already know all these things, but I think it's good to restart from that stage.
N is U cross B.
Excuse me? N is U cross B, yes. Yes, exactly, yes. U, B. So I use this with the right hand, okay? So yes, you can say that N is equal to U cross B. U, B, N, okay? With your right hand, not the left, okay? Doesn't work with your left hand. Okay, now if you do the same with because this was on the edge, so edge dislocation is quite easy to see. Now let's do the same for a screw dislocation. So this is the same. You have the deformed material, you have the perfect crystal here, and this is the screw line with the orientation. So you give this orientation. You make the path the same way as before. So you start at a point, you rotate like this. You can notice that here the displacement is not in a plane. You have the line which is curved, just because of the curvature of the dislocation field. Then you close like that. So this is here you reach the bottom, but this is not the end. Here is the end. So N is here. This is the final point. And Burgers vector is that one. It's from F to S in the perfect crystal, not in the deformed crystal, in the perfect crystal. Okay? So that's the way to visualize Burgers vector for a screw, the same way. And you indeed see that the Burgers vector is collinear to the dislocation line. They are collinear. Okay? So those are the 2 examples. One more thing that we need to understand for dislocation is that now that we have this convention of line orientations and Burgers vector, then there is a new rule. When 2 dislocations meet, if you have this Burgers vector on this U1 dislocations and this second dislocation here, if they meet at this point here, then you can assume some law how the Burgers vector are conserved all along the line. And the law is the following. If you assume that all the lines are oriented toward the points, you see the lines are all merging to that point, then the summation of the Burgers vector is equal to 0. Okay? That's something also very important to define the Burgers vector of a junction, dislocation junction. And tomorrow we'll do a junction in tutorial. So you will be able, with this rule, to visualize what is the Burgers vectors of the resulting interaction of two dislocations. But the thing is that you need to have, it's like electricity actually. It's like the electricity rules, where you have the intensity which are coming toward the point. The summation of the intensity is equal to 0. Okay? So using that, if you have B1, you have B2, then here I know that B3 is that one. Okay? Because B3 is B1 plus B2. Okay? So that's the very important relationship for dislocation, the conservation of the Burgers vector all along the line. Okay, so I said you before that the Burgers vector is constant along the line, and also it is conserved when you have continuity of dislocation with other dislocations. All the Burgers vectors are continuously transferred from one node to the next. Now, how do the dislocation move? What is the dislocation motion? So dislocation motion is like that. If you are, again, for the edge dislocation, because it's easier to visualize, but you could do the same for a mixed, actually. I should do the same for a mixed, but I'm lazy. I don't want to visualize mixed dislocation. It's very complicated to visualize in 3D. So I do the part for an edge. The edge is here. The edge is gliding in like that. So this is what we call the slip plane. The slip plane will be that plane here, which is here, and there, and there. This is the slip plane. So the slip plane is containing the line which is here, and the Burgers vector, which is here. The line and the Burgers vector define the slip plane. So the dislocation is in a plane, like this, and the Burgers vector is in the plane of the dislocation. So here you should say, yeah, but what happens for a screw? Because a screw is collinear to the Burgers vector, like this. So then it's the line and the Burgers vector are the same place, so there is no defined plane. The plane is not defined for a screw. And this is correct. The screw can glide in several planes. Okay? The screw has the possibility to change its slip plane, not the edge. The edge cannot because the line is confined in the plane defined by the line and the Burgers vector. The screw cannot. The screw is collinear to the Burgers vector, so theoretically it could glide to any planes containing the dislocation line. Okay? We'll see that later. Now, this is conservative. Why is it called conservative? It's just because when you, between that stage and that stage, the volume is exactly the same. It's just like if you play with playing cards. If you have a set of playing cards and you shear the playing cards, the volume of your deformed shape is the same as the initial packet. Okay? You have the same shape. You have a conservative motion by shear. Okay? Another possibility is for the dislocation, which was here, to go up. When we go up, we call it climb. The climb mechanism is when your dislocation moves up, so perpendicular to the slip plane. The slip plane was here, and dislocation is going up. So in order to come up, it means that a vacancy somewhere has to come at that place, so that the dislocation is moving a bit upper. Or you can have some interstitial which is coming, so that the dislocation can move down, so it's a climb down. I don't know how to call it, but it's a climb, but on the negative side of your dislocation line. So this is just due to absorption of vacancy or interstitial, and this is no more conservative because you need to introduce extra atoms or to remove atoms to make this motion possible. So this is non-conservative motion, and this implies diffusion theory because you need to compute how fast the vacancy can move toward the dislocations and how they can interact with your dislocation. And at the end, the volume of that volume here is different from the initial volume here. You have a change of volume because of this flux of vacancies. But this happens typically, when do you think there is some diffusion? You have examples of material with diffusion? When do you think you have some vacancy diffusion typically? Which case do you think of? Irradiation, yes. I think irradiation is one of the most important damage where you have interstitial which are done by cascade. And then this creates some vacancy loops and so on, and this diffuses toward the dislocation. Yes, indeed, this is very important mechanism. Or high temperature also, high temperature mechanism. Because of high temperature, you have some interstitial that can move very fast in the materials and converge toward the dislocation. Yes, very good. Okay, so this is the two dislocation motion. Now let's define what are the exact slip planes of your dislocations. So what is a slip plane? So the slip plane, and we saw that it was containing the line and the Burgers vector. So this is the only things I said up to now. So the slip plane is defined by the normal to the plane and the Burgers vector, like this. And mechanically, we can add one more parameter, which will be the critical stress. So the smallest stress you should put on your slip systems to make this dislocation move. So if you don't apply at least that stress, you will not see any motion. So this is what we call the pial force. In this lecture here, I will not explain you much how this could be computed, but you can find this in textbook if you want. The pial force is the minimum force you should apply to move your dislocation in your plane. So what are the possible slip planes in every structure, crystallography? So you have plenty of crystallographic structure. We will not see all of them, of course. We will much focus on the cubic structure and the hexagonal structure in these lectures. And so the cubic is when you have A and B and C. These A, B, C are just the position of two neighbor atoms in your materials. So you can move from one atom to the next by these three coordinates like that. And either you can move in a cube. So A equal B equal C. It means that the three vectors are the same length. And alpha, beta, and gamma is equal to 90 degrees, means that it is a cubic lattice. It's 90 degrees orientation. So this is typically the cubic. And you have many other possibilities. What I want you to recall here is more that notations, because this we will use many times. When you have this bracket like that, it means that this is the specific orientation of the dislocation, typically. If I say that this is the orientation of the Burgers vector, I will put, for example, O11 with this bracket. It means that this is this specific orientation. Or O bar 1, 1 is this orientation. Now if I put this, and if I say O11 with this symbol here, it means that it will be all possibilities of O11. It can be O bar 1, 1, bar 1, 1, O, bar 1, O1, and so on. You can put all the possibilities of all the families of these Burgers vectors in your lattice. So this is all the families. This is a specific one, okay? And you can do the same for the planes. If I say 1, 1, 1 plane, it means that it's this exact plane. If I say this parenthesis for the plane, it means that it's all the families of 1, 1, 1 plane, all of the possible 1, 1, 1 type planes. It could be 1, 1, 1, 1 bar 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, and so on. Okay? So those are all notation that everybody use. So I want you to use the same also in the tutorials typically. So let's go for the simplest one, I would say, the FCC lattice. So FCC is like that. You have a cubic plus some extra atoms in the faces, like that. You can define the plane containing the largest amount of atoms, which is the 1, 1, 1 plane. So this is typically the 1, 1, 1 plane. So why do you say 1, 1, 1? It's just because if you move to 1, 1, and 1, this gives your normal, okay? So it's the Miller, what we call the Miller indexes. So it means that the normal of the plane, the blue plane, is 1, 1, 1 coordinates in this framework. And now the Burgers vector. The Burgers vector will be the shortest distance between two atoms in that plane, which is this direction here typically, or that one, or that one. So this is the shortest distance in the plane. It's not that one is longer, okay? The shortest distance in the plane. And the family of that is 1, 1, 0, okay? So planes is 1, 1, 1 type, and Burgers vector is 1, 1, 0 type. And A over 2 is just because you can see here that it is A over 2, the length of the vector. Now, there is a notation which is used for mechanicians, which is Schmidt and Bose notation. They give some numbers for the Burgers vectors and some letters for the planes, okay? So typically, the 1, 1 plane is the 1, 1, 1 here is the plane number B. They call it B. This is the B vector, the B plane, sorry. And this is the Burgers vector, okay? And for example, using that notation, the 1, 1, 1, 1, 0 bar 1 will be, with that notation, called B, 1, 1, 1 is B, and 1, 0 bar 1, 1, 0 bar 1 is 4. So this is B4, okay? So this is B4, is that slip system for this convention. So just an exercise for you. Are you able to pick up the three Burgers vector belonging to the 1, 1 plane? So the three Burgers vector that I plotted here, those three here, what are they? Are you able to pick up among this data here, the three which belongs to that plane? Who can tell me who they are? Which is which? So we have, this is the 1, 1 plane, so we know that this is B, and we know that it is 4, typically 4. Which one is 4 here, typically? You know where is bar 101? You have an idea where is bar 101? No, Prita, you can't say. Bar 101? Bar 101 and 11 is 0, the product. The fourth one? Which one? Excuse me. Minus 101, yes. Yes, okay. Okay, this one is okay. Yeah. And this one, do you recognize that this one is also?
Because the dot product is 0.
Is 0, exactly. So you have to find exactly all the Burgers vector for which the dot product with 101 is equal to 0. So this one is one of them. And you see where, are you able to visualize that this corresponds to indeed that orientation here? O bar 1, 1 is this vector here. Is 0 on x, bar 1 on y, and 1 on z. Okay? O bar 1, 1 is that one. The second one, we did it, is this one. Bar 1, 0, 1. So it's bar 1 on x, 0 on y, and 1 on z. And what is the third one? 5. So bar 1, 1, 0. Bar 1, 1, 0. Okay? So this is the three types possible for a 1, 1, 1 plane. So it means that in one plane on FCC, you can have three different dislocation lines. Although they are gliding in the same plane, you think they are the same. In TM, they may look the same, but they are not the same because one will propagate a Burgers vector that direction, another in another direction, and the third one in the third direction. Okay, so you have three coplanar slip systems in the 1, 1 plane, like this. So this is what I write here, B2, B4, and B5. Okay? So now the total number of slip planes in the FCC structure, the total amount you can have, will be the 4 planes we have here. Each of them has 3 Burgers vectors. So 3 by 4 is equal to 12. So you have 12 slip systems in FCC. Okay? But now if you look carefully, so those are the systems, I write it here. This is for the plane A, B, C, and D, with the 3 associated Burgers vector. And if you look a bit more on that, you can see that some are common between the planes. You can see that some share the same Burgers vector. So the plane A and the plane B, they have the same Burgers vector, which is the number 2 here, which is this guy, O bar 1, 1. The C and D, they share this Burgers vector. The D and B, they share that one, and so on. Those are the common Burgers vector. So you have always one Burgers vector which is shared by 2 planes in FCC, okay? One Burgers vector belongs to 2 planes, okay? And this explains what we call the cross-slip mechanism. It means that I told you that the screw dislocation do not have its own slip planes because it's not like the edge, which is confined in the plane containing the line and the Burgers vector. When the two are collinear, there is no more plane. But it will glide in one of the 2 compact planes, 111 type. The 2 will be chosen between the 2 that you have here. You have 2 planes possible for your dislocation, A or B. So the dislocation can move in A or B indifferently, okay? And of course, if the dislocation is in one plane, to change the plane, it costs some energy. It's not freely that it will move. It will need to have some cross-slip probability for that to occur. That could depend on temperature, typically. I will explain that later on, okay? But this is obvious with that. A Burgers vector is shared by 2 planes, okay? We can do the same exercise for BCC, for the BCC lattice. This is how it looks like. So you have your BCC cubic. You have your plane, which is now 110 planes. And you have 2 shortest distance in the plane, which is 111. So it's quite funny because it's the reverse of what happened for FCC. FCC, we had the plane which were 111, and the Burgers vector were 110. Now it is opposite, okay? But it's the same. It's similar, I would say, not the same, it's similar. So if I go further, there is another slip system family which is now controversial, so people do not use it much, so I will not spend time on that, which is the 112 planes. Now many people think that they can be also the resulting planes of dislocation moving in those planes, but this is I just put it here for information. So now using that, you have 6 planes like that, and 2 Burgers vector per plane. So again, you have 12 slip systems, the same as before. Each plane contains 2 Burgers vectors. You have 6 planes, the 6 110 planes, which corresponds to the, actually we will see it here, like that. So each Burgers vector is shared by 3 planes. For example, if I take this 111 plane, but 111 Burgers vectors, like that, it could belong to 3 planes, which is the number 2, the 4, and the 5. So compared to the FCC, it means that the Burgers vectors and the normal have been exchanged. So you have the 2 now is the plane, and the B, the letter, is now the Burgers vector. You see in the FCC I say B4, now I call it 4B. Okay. So and my slip system now is 4B, is this one. Okay? So this is for the BCC. Now for that, there is something which is very helpful to analyze and to visualize in 3D. It's what we call the Thomson tetrahedra. Thomson tetrahedra is this guy here. I took one with me, so it's a bit smashed because of the plane, but it's this is my Thomson tetrahedra. So what is it? It's if you take a cubic, a one-side cube like that, and if you put a tetrahedra in your cube, which looks like this, so you have your tetrahedra in your cubic planes like this. Oops. You can put it like this on your cube, and you make this plane here ABC, which is 1, 1, 1. ABC is a 1, 1, 1 plane, and by just rotation, you know that DCA is also a 1, 1, 1 type planes, but it's a bar 1. Here it will be a 1, bar 1, bar 1 plane, and so on. So you have all the 4 planes. 1, 1, 1 for the FCC corresponds to the 4 sides of your Thomson tetrahedra. So if this is 1, 1, 1, this is the Burgers vector. The side of the tetrahedra here this is bar 1, 0, 1, is one Burgers vector. So this is the slip plane, and this is the Burgers vector for this plane. Okay? So we visualize very easily what are the dislocation, in which plane it is. So this is helpful to visualize how dislocation move in the material in 3D. So we can build a Thomson tetrahedra like this. And in that tetrahedra, if you take it out, you will have the edges which corresponds to the Burgers vector, or the screw orientations. The perpendicular to the screw is the edge of this slip plane. So in this slip plane blue here, you have these Burgers vectors, and the dislocation could be described by edge and screw, which are the blue colors here. Edge and screw for this slip system will be the red colors here. Okay? In the same plane, you may have another slip systems, so the coplanar system, which is made of this screw and this edge components, or this Burgers vector and this line directions. And you have the third one, which is this one. So those are the 3 coplanar systems in this 1, 1, 1 plane. And you can do the same for the others, and you have all the edges and screw. Okay? So what I did for you, this is a Thomson tetrahedra. I have printed some of them for you, because we will use it for the tutorial. So you may create your own tetrahedra. Of course, you need to cut and stick. I don't know if they have some scissors and so on available. So I let you take one. I think there are 30, so there should be enough. So I would like you tomorrow to come with this build somehow. If you can do it, I don't know if you are able to make it, but I hope you will. So that we will use it to visualize how dislocations are if you are in one plane, another plane. When 2 dislocations interact, this is very comfortable to use it because you will visualize how this interaction is in 3D. Okay. So this tetrahedra is full of information, and typically on that tetrahedra I put the Schmidt and Bose notation, which is with the comma, with the bracket. Here you have the B for the B plane, and the 2, 4, and 5 are the Burgers vector. So B2 means that this is in that plane, that Burgers vector. Okay. This is how you can read it. B2, B4, and B5 is the Schmidt and Bose notation. This here gives you the orientation of the direction. So it means that this is not what I explained before. Before I explained you that a given direction is just bracket like this. And the family is the bracket like this. Okay. So this should be bracket and bracket, but here I put this thing here. Why is it so? It's just to say that this bar 1, 2 is coming from C to delta. So this direction here is bar 1, 2. Just to give you where is the orientation of the line. Okay. So if this is bar 1, 2, bar 1 is coming from A to delta. This is 2 bar 1 coming from B to delta. Okay. So this is also important for the orientation. You see what it means? So this was taken out from Earth and Lotte. They use this convention, and I think that's very important. Last information you have here also, you have the delta, gamma, alpha, and beta. What are they? They are just the projection of the opposite side of your tetrahedra. So typically if you have B, this is my B on my point, the opposite is beta. Okay? If I take C, the opposite is delta. Is gamma, I'm sorry. If I take a D, this is delta, A is alpha, and so on. Okay? So the opposite to a given summit of the tetrahedra is the Greek letter. And what else? The numbers here in the small arrow, these are the conventions we use for our dislocation dynamics code. So for 3Ds, not for pneumodis, but for 3Ds, We have the edge and screw segments which have a given orientation, so we'll see that later. And this is indicated in that Thomson tetrahedra also, just to be sure what is what. This is number 14, 10, and so on. This gives you the number of the vectors we use in the DD code. Okay? And I think that's it. This is what we can see here. So any question? Who can ask the first question? Yes?
So in BCC, there will be 48 systems in Julian. So in FCC it is 12 and in BCC it is 48.
48 depends if you put signs or not with your SIP systems. Maybe you are dealing with finite element, no? Yes. In finite elements, this is a bit different. They will put, for BCC, here they don't say that this is 12, they say this is 24 SIP system, usually, because they put the positive shear and the negative shear. So they have the positive and negative SIP system. So they are all doubled. So maybe this is why you have 48 in your BCC. But theoretically, in the geometric point of view, there's only 24. If you assume that one system could be positive and negative. Okay. Actually, and in my case, I will use only 12 because I never use that one here.
And what is that concept regarding BCC that only 5 systems are activated? And it's little confusing that 5 systems are also active that BCC.
For the number of systems independently to be active. So that's again a mechanical point of view. I think we can go it later. In my DD code, this is not something that we put inside, and we can indeed, if you actually, I would say differently. If you have in DD code, if you impose a loading, then the dislocation you have will move accordingly to your loading. But indeed, if you shear that way, it can move that way. If there is no other plane to move in the direction you put, it can move in another direction. In the mechanical point of view, what people say is that they want to have a given strain in one direction. So they want to apply a strain in a given direction, and they want to be sure how many slip systems could accommodate this strain, how should be active in order to accommodate exactly this direction. And this only happens in a mechanical point of view, in a continuum modeling, not in the discrete modeling. In the discrete scale, this is not the reality. It doesn't happen like that. So, and why is it 5? It's just because theoretically you have 6 degrees of freedom, and you remove 1 because you say that you have a conservative of the volume. And this means that this is why you need to have 5 SIP systems at least to accommodate a given the orientation in continuum. But this is only for continuum. For DD, you will see that sometimes, typically, and this happens also experimentally, I don't have the picture here, we have a single crystal of magnesium. Magnesium is hexagonal. This is the C-axis of the crystal, and this was a micropillar. So this was a single crystal micropillar. C-axis is here. Magnesium doesn't want to deform along the prismatic planes. They always want to deform on the basal SIP systems. If you push on that, it will slide on the left, perpendicularly to what you applied. So you push, and the mechanism is totally shift on the right. Continuum modeling would not give it, typically. You will have a problem here. You see? This is typical because of that. So then you have some artificial things to put to get rid of that, but this is typically the idea. Okay. So I would say that in discrete modeling, we don't need that 5 systems for each steep directions because it's discrete.
For discrete modeling, all the 24 flip systems have equal probability.
Exactly, yes, yeah. Yes and no, not for hexagonal. For hexagonal, as I said, for the basal, prismatic, pyramidal, they don't have the same critical stress. The pial force are not the same. So there may be a difference. For cubic, they are all the same. They are all equivalent, yes. FCC, BCC, all the slip systems are equivalent, yes.
Does this follow the Schmidt law? I mean, the slip system with maximum result stress will get active.
Excuse me, the what?
Schmidt law, generalized.
The Schmidt law, yeah. Yes, sure, yeah. DD does what you put in the box. So it means that by definition, it will follow the Schmidt law. So you will see that in the next lecture. I will explain you how we move the dislocations. So the Schmidt law, the DD will follow that. But in some case, typically for the BCC, I will not explain that actually. You have some hard and soft motion for the dislocation. I don't know if you are aware of that. For the BCC structure, the dislocation can move easily or not easily, depending on the free planes it moves on. And this, in the dislocation dynamics code, has to be put as a law. You have to put a rule for that, which is what we call the twin anti-twin law. So you have the twin, which is easy, and anti-twin, which is very difficult. So this, by definition, dislocation dynamics, if you use a normal call, will be all the same. So dislocation can move in the three planes, but experimentally we know that it is not true. Some planes are more difficult than others, just because of the geometry of the screw. So here is the example where the Schmidt law is not working for BCC, but in the DD code we need to put that by hand. It's not automatically an output of the code; it's an input of the code. Okay. You what? I don't understand what you said. Yes, the Burgers vector is always constant on the line. Yes, yes. Any change? The vector, the Burgers vector? The Burgers vector on the line has to be a constant. If the line is a single line, then the Burgers vector is a unique vector. Now, if you have an intersection with another one, then you need to apply the rules, the node rules, so that the summation of the Burgers vector is equal to 0 if all the line direction is coming toward the node. So, assuming that, then you have all your network which is defined that one. You can have? Oh, that's another thing. So, that's another thing. So if you have a box, a cubic box, a perfect box, if you put dislocation inside, if you have a non-zero net Burgers vectors, then your shape of the crystal will be deformed. It will not be a cube. So that's the only problem. So if you want to start with a dislocation network, so that your box is a cube, then you should have a net zero, a zero net Burgers vector. So the summation of the Burgers vector should be equal to 0. And it's more complicated than that because you need also to be sure that if you have prismatic loops, if you have an interstitial one, you should have in the same slip plane, cylinder. I think we'll do that next week. You should have the same vacancy. You have a vacancy interstitial in the same plane so that they compensate exactly the deformation induced by the loops. So it's not only the total numbers of Burgers vector, which is equal to 0, but also in each slip plane. Okay. But that's another question. Okay. Yeah. So I will remember that for next week. Yes, exactly. Yeah, yeah, because a dislocation could not stop. Although I showed you the Frank-Reed source experimentally, and it looks like it is pinned there with nothing. Actually, it's not nothing. And Professor Sundararaman could tell us that it's not because you don't see dislocation that there is no dislocation. Actually, my dislocation was pinned at both ends. It emits the Frank-Reed source. But I'm sure that locally here there was some over dislocation that because of the G orientation of the TEM, they were not visible at that time. But if you rotate a bit your specimen, you would see that some forest dislocation were there actually. So dislocation were not stopped in the material, they were connected to another one. And they were just pinned there. Okay? So either they are pinned with forest, with over dislocation, or at the surface. You're right. Either at the surface or with other dislocation. They cannot stop in the material. And we will see with the equation that if they stop, the local stress is infinite. So it cannot be possible. Okay. Yes?
Sir, with the formula tau is equal to tau m sin n pi x over b.
Yes.
X is the displacement, right?
So the x over b. So you mean for the
Empirical formula that we had. Defining the shear stress. Tau is equal to
this one. Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
X is the displacement.
It's a displacement on my line. Yes. Yes.
So with
Yes.
increasing x,
Yes.
there will be point where tau will have negative value.
Yes. It's this negative here. Yeah. Sure.
Yes, sir. So what's that negative value suggest? I mean,
Yes. When you have your, I don't know. So the atoms were coming up and then coming down. When it was coming down, this is the negative part of it. You see. Okay. But this negative part is not important. What we need to follow is the maximum. So the maximum is the maximum. As soon as you get here, it will be totally all shear. You see. So the maximum is what I gave you is B over A. Okay. This is the one that we should remember. Okay, we have 5 more minutes if you want some more questions. Was it clear? Am I too fast or too slow? How do you think it? I think we should not go fast because it will be a very long set of lectures. Maybe I'm too slow, but I don't know. I hope I will. Anyway, if I don't have time to finish today, we'll finish tomorrow, so we have time. Okay? So this was for my DD code. So it's just a convention we use. So we start with a 1-1-1 plane. So this is the 1-1-1 plane. And we say that this is the first dislocation. and this is a screw, and then edge number 2. So this is the edge associated to that screw, and we iterate with that. And the freeze there is just because this screw can move on this or that. Yeah. This is the typical good question that came out now. We spoke about cross-slip. Cross-slip in this tetrahedra is obvious. You have your screw dislocation, which is here. The screw is collinear to the Burgers vector. It can glide in that plane or that plane. This is the cross-slip mechanism. Okay? Cross-slip mechanism is easy to visualize on your tetrahedra. It's just a change of two planes containing the same Burgers vector. Okay. So this is why I use this notation. The screw 1 can move on direction number 2 or 3. Okay. And they're all like that. So 13, 14, and 15. See, whatever. But this is, we will not use 3ds, but this is just, if in the case later on you want to use 3ds, you will have it. So one more question, or tea break, or what do you want? You want tea? Okay, I think let's go for tea then.